Part 5, The Warning. The council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every member species packed the seats and the air was thick with tension. For the first time in council history, the future of an entire species membership was being debated. High Arbiter Velrosh called the session to order. His crystalline form seemed dimmer than usual, as if the weight of recent events had somehow dulled his light. This council must decide the fate of humanity's membership in our alliance, he announced. The incident at Vrel Station cannot be ignored. We must determine whether humans are capable of following civilized rules of warfare, or whether they are too dangerous to remain part of our alliance. Commander Tae Yang stood in the center of the chamber, alone. He had refused legal representation, insisting that he would speak for his people himself. Ambassador Jiwan sat in the gallery, her hands clenched together so tightly that her knuckles were white. Commander Tae Yang, Velrosh said, you may speak in your defense. Tae Yang looked up at the assembled council members. I'm not here to defend what happened at Vrel Station. I can't defend it. 3,000 beings died, most of them non-combatants. That's a tragedy, and I take full responsibility as the mission commander. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some council members seemed surprised by his honesty. But, Tae Yang continued, I am here to make you understand why it happened, not to excuse it but to explain it. Because if you don't understand, you'll make the same mistake again with some other species, and more people will die. We understand perfectly, a council member from a species called the Nethrim said sharply. Humans are violent and undisciplined. You proved it. No, Tae Yang said firmly. You proved that you don't understand humans at all. You saw our noise and our music and our jokes and you thought it meant we weren't serious about warfare. You were wrong. Those things were the only reason we could be trusted in warfare. War Sage Krell stood from his seat. The council recognizes War Sage Krell. The ancient being's voice resonated through the chamber. I have studied warfare across species for 3 centuries. I have analyzed every major conflict in council history. And I have spent the last month studying human military history. I am here to tell you that Commander Tae Yang is correct. We made a fundamental error in judgment. He activated displays around the chamber showing human historical records. Humans evolved as social predators. This is not unusual. Several council species share similar origins. What makes humans unique is the intensity of their emotional engagement with violence. When a human kills, they feel it deeply. This creates a psychological burden that most species don't experience. The display showed images from human history, soldiers in ancient wars, modern conflicts, and everything in between. Throughout their history, humans have developed rituals around warfare. War songs, battle cries, ceremonies before and after combat. These weren't entertainment. They were psychological tools that allowed humans to do terrible things while maintaining their moral framework. The noise helps them process what they're doing in real time. Without it, they cannot cope. A council member who looked like a cloud of gas spoke up, but surely civilized beings should be able to fight without such primitive displays. For your species, perhaps, Krell replied, but not for humans. When humans fight in silence, one of 2 things happens. Either they shut down completely, unable to process the psychological burden of violence, or they detach emotionally, becoming cold and mechanical. The humans call this dissociation. It's a survival mechanism, but it's a dangerous one. Dr. Kyung-soo was called to present his findings. He stood and spoke with quiet authority. I've been monitoring human psychological markers throughout the silent protocol period. The data is clear. Without their usual coping mechanisms, human soldiers experience severe mental health consequences. But more importantly, they lose their moral decision-making capabilities. He displayed brain scan data on the chamber screens. This is a human soldier before silent protocols. You can see high activity in the prefrontal cortex. That's the area responsible for moral reasoning and decision-making. This soldier is consciously choosing their actions, weighing consequences, and making ethical judgments. He switched to another image. This is a human soldier, after 8 weeks of silent protocols. The prefrontal cortex activity is dramatically reduced. The soldier is operating primarily on instinct and training. They're not making conscious moral choices anymore. They're just reacting. Are you saying humans can't control themselves? Asked Counselor Threx. I'm saying humans evolved a specific set of controls and we removed them, Kyung-soo replied. Imagine if we asked your species to fight while deliberately shutting down your primary sensory system. You would struggle, yes? For humans, the noise is as essential as your senses. It's how they stay grounded in their humanity while doing inhuman things. Ambassador Jiwan was given the floor. She stood and faced the council with quiet dignity. I won't ask you to forgive what happened at Vrel Station. Those deaths are on us. On all of us, human and council alike. But I will ask you to understand that humans tried to meet your expectations. We tried to fight your way, to be the soldiers you wanted us to be. And in doing so, we became something worse than you ever imagined. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Humans are loud in battle because we're afraid of what we'll become if we're quiet. The noise reminds us that we're still people, still capable of choice, still bound by morality. Take away the noise and you take away the person. What's left is just a predator with a gun. The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. Then Ensign Jae Hwan was brought forward. He had been cleared from the medical bay but still looked haunted. He spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried through the entire chamber. I'm one of the lucky ones, he said. When the silence became too much, I just shut down. I couldn't fight anymore. But I saw what happened to others. My squadron leader, a man I respected more than anyone, became someone I didn't recognize. He was cold, efficient, and stopped caring about anything except completing the mission. When I was recovered enough to talk to him, he didn't even remember my name. He said it was easier to not remember. Easier to not care. Jae Hwan looked directly at Velrosh. You wanted us to be professional soldiers, but you didn't understand that for humans, being professional means staying human. The music, the jokes, the noise, that's not us being unprofessional. That's us being professional enough to know we need help staying good people while doing bad things. The testimony continued for hours. Other human soldiers spoke. Medical personnel presented psychological evaluations. Even some non-human council officers who had worked with humans spoke about the change they had observed. Finally, it was time for deliberation. The council debated for 2 full days. Some members still insisted that humans were too dangerous and should be expelled. Others argued that the council shared the blame for imposing inappropriate protocols. The arguments went in circles until Warsage Krell stood again. This council faces a choice, he said. We can expel humanity and lose our most effective ground forces in a war we're still losing. Or we can admit our mistake, learn from it, and create new protocols that respect human nature rather than fighting against it. But how can we trust them? Demanded the Nethrim representative. How can we know they won't lose control again? Because, Krell replied, we will let them be themselves. A human who fights with music and laughter is a human who is in control. That's the paradox we failed to understand. The noise isn't a loss of control, it's the mechanism of control. After more debate, High Arbiter Velrosh called for a vote. The chamber went silent as the votes were tallied. Humanity would not be expelled. Instead, new protocols would be established. Warsage Krell was tasked with drafting the official directive. He worked with Ambassador Jiwan, Dr. Kyung-soo, and Commander Tae Yang to create a document that would change how the galaxy understood human warfare. The directive was issued to all council forces and was translated into over 300 languages. It became known simply as the Warning. The document began with a formal declaration of policy, but it was the explanatory section that spread throughout the galaxy. Human forces engage in combat with characteristic vocalizations, music, and other auditory displays. This behavior must not be restricted or discouraged. It serves essential psychological functions that allow human soldiers to maintain moral decision-making capabilities during combat operations. Commanders should understand the following. A human soldier who shouts, who sings, who maintains verbal contact with their comrades. This is a human who is consciously processing their actions. They are making choices, following rules of engagement, and maintaining their ethical framework even while engaged in violence. However, if human forces become silent during combat operations, this should be considered a critical warning sign. Silent humans are not exercising greater discipline. They are experiencing psychological dissociation from their actions. In this state, humans operate primarily on instinct and training without conscious moral oversight. Silent humans do not distinguish effectively between combatants and non-combatants. They do not respond normally to surrender signals. They process all potential threats with equal efficiency and ruthlessness. Part 4. The Incident at Vrel Station. The emergency council session was still in progress when the orders came through. Vrel Station had to be taken. It was a massive Vryn stronghold positioned at a strategic jump point. Whoever controlled Vrel Station controlled access to 3 entire sectors. The council needed it, and they needed it now. Commander Taeyang received the orders in his quarters. He had just told his officers they would no longer follow silence protocols. Now he was being assigned to lead the assault on the most important target of the war. The mission briefing arrived encrypted and marked as highest priority. Taeyang read it 3 times, and each time his stomach sank lower. The assault force would consist of human ground troops and council naval support. The council wanted humans to lead the ground assault because, despite everything, humans were still the best ground fighters in the galaxy. They wanted it done fast before the Vryn could reinforce their position, and they wanted it done under silence protocols. Lieutenant Hyejin entered his quarters without knocking. "Sir, I just saw the orders. Please tell me you're not going to accept this mission." "I don't have a choice," Taeyang said quietly. "Vrel Station is too important. If we refuse, thousands more will die in future battles. But under silence protocols, sir, after what happened on Target Epsilon." "I know." Taeyang stood and looked out the viewport at the stars. "But if we refuse now, the council will see it as proof that humans can't be trusted. They'll sideline us, maybe expel us from the alliance entirely. We can't let that happen. So what do? Taeyang turned to face her. His eyes were tired, but his voice was firm. "We do the mission. We follow the protocols they've mandated. And when it's over, they'll finally understand what they've done to us." Hyejin felt cold. "Sir, you think something will go wrong. I think something already went wrong. We're just going to show them exactly how wrong." The assault force assembled over 3 days. Commander Taeyang's flagship would coordinate the naval elements, while Captain Bora would lead the ground assault. Bora was known as one of the best special operations commanders in the human military. She had led 30 successful operations across 2 years of warfare. She met with Taeyang before the mission in the briefing room of the flagship. "Captain Bora," Taeyang said, "I need to be direct with you. This mission is being conducted under silence protocols. No music, minimal communication. You understand what that means?" Bora's face was expressionless. She had been fighting in silence for 8 weeks now, longer than almost anyone. Something behind her eyes looked different than it used to. Harder, colder. "I understand, Commander. My team will complete the mission. Captain, I need to know you're still with us, still yourself." Bora smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm exactly who I need to be to get this job done, sir." After she left, Hyejin whispered to Taeyang, "Sir, she's not right. None of the special operations teams are. They've been in silence too long." "I know," Taeyang said, "but they're still the best we have." The assault began at 600 station time. Taeyang's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vrel system and immediately engaged the Vryn orbital defenses. The battle was fierce, but the human ships fought with their usual effectiveness. In silence, the bridge of Taeyang's flagship was eerily quiet. Officers called out tactical data in flat voices. Weapons fire streaked across the viewports without comment. When the destroyer Resolute took critical damage and was forced to withdraw, the only acknowledgement was a brief "understood." Fall back to safe distance. No one asked if the crew was okay. No one made jokes to ease the tension. They just fought. On the station itself, Captain Bora's team breached through a maintenance airlock. 40 operators, the absolute best humanity had to offer, moving through the corridors of Vrel Station like ghosts. They encountered the first Vryn defenders within 5 minutes. The engagement was over in seconds. Bora's team moved with inhuman precision, weapons firing in perfect synchronization. 10 Vryn dead before they could even sound an alarm. "Section A7 secure," Bora reported over the comm. Her voice was completely emotionless. Moving to Section A8, they moved deeper into the station. More Vryn appeared and more Vryn died. Bora's team didn't take prisoners. They didn't check corners twice. They simply moved forward like a machine designed for one purpose: to kill. On the flagship, Dr. Kyung-soo monitored the ground team's biometric data. What he saw terrified him. "Commander," he said urgently to Taeyang, "the ground team's stress markers are abnormal. They're showing signs of extreme dissociation." "What does that mean?" Hyejin asked. "It means they're not fully present. Their minds have disconnected from their actions as a protection mechanism. They're operating on automatic." "Can they still complete the mission?" Taeyang asked. "Probably. But Commander, they're not making conscious decisions anymore. They're just reacting to threats, real or perceived. Taeyang closed his eyes. Maintain monitoring. Alert me if it gets worse. It got worse. Bora's team reached the central command section of the station. This was where the Vrin commanders directed their operations. It was also where most of the station's support personnel worked. Data analysts, communications specialists, medical staff. The team breached the central hub and entered a large open space filled with workstations. Vrin personnel scattered, running for cover. Some reached for weapons. Most did not. In the old days, before silence protocols, Bora would have shouted orders. Weapons down. Hands visible. Surrender and you'll be detained. Her team would have covered the room while identifying threats. Now in silence, they just opened fire. The entire room was cleared in 90 seconds. Every Vrin in the space was dead. Combatants and non-combatants alike. Bora moved forward, stepping over bodies without looking at them. Her team followed. They secured the data archives and began downloading the information they needed. Mission objective achieved, Bora reported. Station is secure. Copy that, Taeyang replied. Begin evac procedures. But the team didn't evac. They continued moving through the station, clearing every section they encountered. When they found Vrin personnel hiding in storage rooms, they eliminated them. When they found medical bays full of wounded, they eliminated them. When they found what appeared to be civilian housing sections, they eliminated everyone inside. On the flagship, Kyungsoo watched the biometric data with growing horror. Commander, they're not stopping. The mission objective is complete, but they're still engaging. Captain Bora, Taeyang called over the comm. Mission complete. Exfiltrate immediately. Understood, Bora replied. But her team kept moving, kept clearing, kept killing. Captain, acknowledge your orders. Extract your team now. There was a long pause. Then Bora's voice came back, and for the first time there was something in it. Confusion, maybe. Or fear, sir. I can't remember when you told us to stop. We're clearing the station. That's the mission. The mission is complete. Get your people out of there. Another pause. Yes, sir. Extraction in progress. The team finally withdrew, moving back to their insertion point and boarding their transport. As they lifted off, Taeyang allowed himself to breathe, but the damage was already done. The council inspection team arrived at Vrel Station 3 hours later. Counselor Threx, who had investigated the Target Epsilon incident, led the inspection personally. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Vrin military personnel at the command section had been killed in combat. That was expected. But as the inspection team moved deeper into the station, they found bodies everywhere. Maintenance workers, medical staff, data technicians, even what appeared to be family housing areas. The final count was devastating. Over 3,000 Vrin personnel dead. Approximately 2,000 of them were non-combatants. Threx stood in the central hub where Bora's team had begun their killing spree and tried to understand what had happened. The tactical reports showed that the human team had completed their primary objective in less than 2 hours. Everything after that was unnecessary. He called for Commander Taeyang to be brought to the station for questioning. Taeyang arrived on a shuttle with Ambassador Ji-won and Dr. Kyungsoo. They walked through the station in silence, seeing the bodies, understanding what had happened. In the central hub, Threx confronted them. Commander Taeyang, your forces have committed war crimes on a massive scale. Explain yourself, Taeyang stood at attention. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. I take full responsibility for the actions of my forces. But before you judge us, I need you to understand what you did to us. What we did? Threx's voice rose. We asked you to fight with discipline. You asked us to fight without our safeguards, Taeyang replied. You stripped away the mechanisms that keep us human during combat, and then you acted surprised when we stopped being human. Ji-won stepped forward. Counselor, we warned you. Dr. Kyungsoo warned you. War Sage Krell warned you. But you didn't listen. You thought the noise was a sign of weakness. You didn't understand it was the only thing preventing this. Captain Bora and her team are not monsters, Taeyang continued. They are good soldiers who were forced to fight in a way that goes against their fundamental nature. They dissociated from their actions. They stopped seeing individuals and started seeing only targets. Part 3, The Breaking Point, Doctor. Kyungsoo stood before the Council Military Tribunal with a data pad in his hands and fear in his heart. He had spent 6 days preparing this presentation, knowing that it might be the most important thing he ever did. The tribunal chamber was a vast circular room with seats arranged in tiers around a central platform. Representatives from 24 species looked down at him, their faces or face equivalents unreadable. High Arbiter Velrosh sat at the highest point, his crystalline form catching and scattering the light. "Dr. Kyung-soo," Velrosh said, his voice resonating through the chamber, "you have requested this emergency session to discuss human combat protocols. The council is listening." Kyung-soo took a breath and began. "Thank you, High Arbiter. I'm here to present evidence that the silent combat protocols imposed on human forces are causing severe psychological damage and making our soldiers less effective, not more." He activated his datapad and holographic displays appeared around the chamber, showing graphs and statistics. Since implementing silent protocols 7 weeks ago, human casualties have increased by 137%. But that's not the most concerning data. Psychological stress markers have increased by 400%. We've had 83 cases of combat-related mental health crises. Before silent protocols, our average was 2 per month. A council member from a species that resembled a floating jellyfish spoke up. "Perhaps humans are simply weaker mentally than other species. This would explain why they need noise to function." "That's not correct," Kyung-soo replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "Human military history spans thousands of years. We fought in every conceivable condition. What the data shows is that humans need emotional release mechanisms during combat. The music, the talking, the jokes, these aren't signs of weakness. They're pressure valves." "Explain," Velrosh commanded. Kyung-soo pulled up another display. "Humans experience combat differently than most council species. We're relatively young as a spacefaring species, but we evolved as social predators. We have high emotional engagement with our actions. When we fight, we feel it deeply. The noise helps us process those feelings in real time. Without it, the emotions don't go away. They build up." "What happens when they build up?" asked another council member, a being that looked like a collection of floating rocks. "2 things," Kyung-soo said. "Either humans shut down completely like Ensign Jae-hwan, whose case I've documented, or—" He hesitated. This was the part that frightened him. "Or?" Velrosh prompted. "Or they detach emotionally. They stop feeling anything at all. They become cold, mechanical, and stop making moral distinctions." The chamber was quiet. Kyung-soo continued. "I've been studying human military history. There's a pattern. When human soldiers become too detached from the emotional reality of combat, they become capable of terrible things. Not because they're cruel, but because they stop seeing their enemies as living beings. They become efficient. Efficiency is desirable in warfare," a council member noted. "Not this kind of efficiency," Kyung-soo said quietly. "This is efficiency without conscience. And it's dangerous," Velrosh leaned forward. "Doctor, are you suggesting that humans are inherently violent and need these noise protocols to control themselves?" "No, High Arbiter. I'm suggesting that humans need these protocols to stay human while doing violence. There's a difference." The discussion continued for 2 hours. Some council members understood what Kyung-soo was trying to say. Others thought he was making excuses for human weakness. In the end, Velrosh made a ruling. "The silent protocols will continue," he declared. "However, we will monitor the situation closely. If human performance continues to decline, we will reconsider. This tribunal is adjourned." Kyung-soo left the chamber feeling like he had failed. He found Ambassador Ji-won waiting for him outside. "They didn't listen," he said. "Some of them did," Ji-won replied. "But not enough." "Not yet. What do we do now?" Ji-won looked tired. "We wait, and we hope nothing terrible happens before they understand." Something terrible happened 3 days later. Commander Yuna led a ground force operation on a contested moon designated as Target Epsilon. The moon had strategic value and was occupied by a Vrin military installation. The mission was to take the installation and secure its data archives. Yuna was a veteran with 12 years of combat experience. She had led ground operations on 17 different worlds. Her Marines respected her because she was tough but fair, and because she always brought them home. She had also always led them with music playing over the squad comm, and with constant chatter to keep morale up. Now, as her transport descended toward the surface of Target Epsilon, the only sound was the hum of engines and the occasional tactical update. "ETA 2 minutes, the pilot said. "Landing zone looks clear." "Copy that," Yuna replied. Her voice was flat, emotionless. She had been fighting in silence for 7 weeks now, and she could feel something changing inside her. She didn't like it, but she couldn't stop it either. The transport landed and her Marines deployed, 50 soldiers moving in perfect silence through the alien landscape. They reached the Vryn installation and began their assault. The Vryn defenders fought back hard. Yuna's Marines moved through the facility room by room, clearing each section with mechanical precision. Where they usually moved with controlled aggression, now they moved like machines. A Vryn defender emerged from a side corridor, weapon raised. Private Donghyun shot him 3 times before the creature could fire. Normally, someone would have made a joke or offered encouragement. Now Donghyun just said, "Contact eliminated, moving forward." The Marines secured the facility in 43 minutes. It was a textbook operation. Perfect execution, minimal casualties. Yuna filed her report and prepared her team for extraction. It wasn't until the Council inspection team arrived that the problem was discovered. The inspection team, led by a being named Counselor Threx, walked through the facility documenting what they found. What they found made them sick. The Vryn military installation had a support staff. Technicians, medical personnel, maintenance workers, non-combatants. Council rules of engagement required that non-combatants be identified and detained, not killed. Yuna's Marines had killed all of them, not in a massacre, not in a rage. They had simply moved through the facility, treating every Vryn they encountered as a target. They hadn't checked for weapons. They hadn't offered surrender. They had just eliminated everything that moved. When Threx confronted Yuna, she stared at him blankly. "Commander, your forces killed approximately 200 non-combatants. This is a violation of Council military law. Can you explain?" Yuna tried to remember. The whole mission was a blur. We secured the facility. We eliminated resistance. These beings weren't offering resistance. They were hiding in storage rooms and medical bays. They were Vryn. We were told to secure the facility. Yuna's voice was still flat, but something in her eyes suggested she was starting to understand what had happened. We secured the facility. You killed everyone inside it," Threx said. "Did you not distinguish between combatants and non-combatants?" Yuna closed her eyes. I don't remember thinking about it. We just moved through the rooms and... She sat down suddenly as if her legs had stopped working. What did we do? Private Donghyun, who had been part of the operation, was interviewed separately. When asked why he killed non-combatants, he said something that would haunt the Council for years to come. "I don't know. I saw movement, I fired. It was automatic. I didn't feel anything. I still don't feel anything. It's like I was watching someone else do it." Is that normal? Far from the contested moon in a research facility on a Council core world, an ancient being named Warsage Krell read the reports with growing horror. Krell had studied warfare for 3 centuries. He had analyzed every major conflict in Council history and had written 17 books on military psychology. He was considered the foremost expert on how different species approached combat. When he heard about the incident on Target Epsilon, he immediately requested access to all human military records. What he found in those records made him understand what Dr. Kyung-soo had been trying to say. Human history was full of wars, thousands of years of combat, and within that history there was a pattern. When humans fought with ritual, with ceremony, with emotional engagement, they generally observed rules of war. They treated prisoners humanely. They distinguished between soldiers and civilians. But when humans became detached from the emotional reality of combat, they became something else. The records showed massacres, atrocities, genocides, not because humans were evil, but because they had stopped seeing their enemies as people. They had become too efficient. Krell found an ancient human text about something called moral injury, the psychological damage that occurred when soldiers acted against their own moral code. He found studies showing how human soldiers needed emotional processing to maintain their sense of right and wrong during combat. The noise, the music, the chatter, these weren't distractions. They were safeguards. Krell immediately contacted the Council and requested an emergency session. Unlike Dr. Kyung-soo, Krell was a respected member with centuries of credibility. When he spoke, the Council listened. Part 2. The silence falls. The briefing room aboard Commander Tae Yang's flagship was full, but nobody was talking. 30 human officers sat in their chairs, listening to their commander explain the new protocols. The usual pre-mission energy was gone. Instead, there was a heavy tension that filled the room like smoke. "I know this isn't what any of us want," Tae Yang said. He stood at the front of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. "But we're part of the council now. We follow their rules. That means silent running during the Tertius system defense." Captain Sung-min raised his hand. "Sir, with respect, we fight better with the music. It keeps us sharp. Keeps us human." "I agree," Tae Yang replied. "But the council believes it makes us less professional. They think we're too loud, too chaotic, so we're going to show them we can do it their way." Lieutenant Hyejin, the tactical officer, looked down at her hands. She had been in the military for 8 years. Every battle, every engagement had been accompanied by the sound of her crew's voices and their shared playlists. The thought of fighting in silence made her chest feel tight. "What about emergency communications?" someone asked. "Tactical only," Tae Yang said. "Target coordinates, damage reports, essential information. Nothing else. No encouragement, no jokes, no check-ins unless absolutely necessary." The room stayed quiet. Finally, Sung-min spoke again. "We'll do our jobs, Commander." "We always do." "I know you will," Tae Yang said. "Dismissed." As the officers filed out, Hyejin approached her commander. "Sir, can I speak freely?" "Always. This feels wrong. Not just uncomfortable, wrong. Like we're being asked to cut off a part of ourselves." Tae Yang met her eyes. "I know, but orders are orders. We'll adapt." Hyejin nodded and left, but Tae Yang could see the doubt in her face. 2 days later, the combined council and human fleet arrived at the Tertius system. A Vryn assault force was moving toward the colony world, home to 6 million council citizens. The battle would be fierce. High Arbiter Velrosh watched from his command ship as the human vessels took their positions. He had assigned Fleet Admiral Dronkar to observe the human forces directly and report on their performance under the new protocols. "Human fleet is in position," Dronkar reported. "Communications are quiet, very quiet." "As they should be," Velrosh replied. "Now we will see what humans can do when they fight with proper discipline." The Vryn fleet emerged from behind Tertius III's largest moon. 200 ships all moving in perfect synchronization. The council forces moved to intercept, and the humans advanced with them. Dronkar opened a channel to monitor human communications, as he had been ordered to do. What he heard made him uncomfortable. Nothing. The human ships moved in formation, but there was no chatter, no music, no sound at all except for occasional tactical updates delivered in flat, emotionless voices. Target acquired. Coordinates sent. Confirmed. Engaging. Taking fire. Shields at 70%. It was professional. It was efficient. But something about it made Dronkar's scales itch. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Sung-min gripped his command chair as his ship dove into combat. The bridge was silent except for the beeping of instruments and the quiet voices of his crew calling out technical data. It felt like being in a tomb. His gunner scored a direct hit on a Vryn fighter, destroying it completely. Normally, someone would have cheered or made a joke. Now the gunner just said, "Target destroyed. Acquiring next target." Sung-min wanted to say something, anything to break the terrible silence. But he had his orders. The battle continued. The human ships fought well, they always did. But Dronkar noticed something odd in their tactics. The humans were following standard combat procedures almost exactly. They weren't taking the creative risks that usually characterized human warfare. They weren't being unpredictable, they were being perfect. And somehow that was worse. "Human forces are performing adequately," Dronkar reported to Velrosh. "They have eliminated 17 enemy vessels with minimal damage to themselves, but what?" Velrosh asked. "They seem different. Less dynamic. Their tactics are sound, but they lack the innovation we've come to expect from them." Velrosh considered this. Perhaps that innovation was simply chaos. Real discipline requires consistency, not creativity. Dronkar wasn't sure he agreed, but he said nothing. The battle lasted 3 hours. In the end, the Vryn were pushed back and the colony was saved. By every tactical measure, it was a success, but the human casualties were higher than usual. Not catastrophically so, but enough to be noticeable. And when the after-action reports came in, they revealed something troubling. Aboard Tae Yang's flagship, Lieutenant Hyejin compiled the data. She brought it to the commander's quarters personally. Sir, I have the casualty reports and the psychological assessments. Tai Yang looked up from his desk. He looked tired. How bad? 12 dead, 47 injured. That's 3 times our average casualty rate. Hyojin paused. But that's not the worst part. Sir, the psychological evaluations are concerning. Stress markers are up 40% across all crews. 17 personnel have requested mental health consultations. They're calling it the silence? The silence? That's what they're calling it, sir. The absence of the usual noise. They say it made the battlefield different. More real, more horrible. Taeyang rubbed his face. Combat is horrible. We all know that, yes, sir. But apparently the music and the talking made it bearable. Without that, people are having trouble processing what they went through. Some of them are describing symptoms consistent with acute stress reactions. There was a knock on the door. Dr. Kyung-soo, the human xenopsychologist attached to the fleet, entered without waiting for permission. He looked angry. Commander, we need to talk about these silence protocols. Doctor, I'm aware of the psychological reports. With respect, sir, I don't think you are. I just finished interviewing 20 crew members from different ships. Do you know what they all said? They said the silence made them realize what they were actually doing. Killing, destroying, watching people die. When they had the music and the chatter, it created a psychological buffer. It let them stay focused on the mission rather than dwelling on the horror of it. Taeyang stood up. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying that what the Council thinks is unprofessional behavior is actually a crucial coping mechanism. Humans don't handle combat the same way other species do. We need those emotional outlets. Without them, we're forcing our people to endure trauma without any way to process it. Can you prove this? Taeyang asked. I'm preparing a full report. But Commander, I've been studying military psychology for 20 years. I've seen what happens when soldiers don't have healthy ways to deal with combat stress. It's not good. And if we keep fighting in silence, we're going to see breakdowns, maybe worse. Taeyang sat back down heavily. The Council won't care. They think we're barbarians who need to be civilized. Then we need to make them understand, Dr. Kyung-soo said. Before someone gets seriously hurt. On the Council command ship, Velrosh reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. The humans had fought well. More importantly, they had fought quietly. The experiment was a success. Continue the silent protocols for all future engagements, he ordered. The humans are adapting well. Dronkar, still monitoring the human channels, wasn't so sure. He had heard the flat, lifeless voices of the human commanders. He had seen how their tactics had become mechanical and predictable. Something was wrong, even if he couldn't quite define it. As you command, High Arbiter, he said. 3 weeks passed. The human fleet fought 4 more battles under silent protocols. They won all 4, but the casualties continued to climb. More concerning were the psychological reports that Dr. Kyung-soo sent to both Human Command and the Council. Most concerning of all was what happened to Ensign Jae-hwan. He was a young pilot, fresh from the academy, flying a fighter from the carrier Defiant. In his first 3 battles fighting with music and crew chatter, he had performed excellently. He was confident, skilled, and showed great promise. In his 4th battle under silence protocols, something broke. His squadron was on a routine patrol when they encountered a small Vryn scout group. It should have been a simple engagement. But when the fighting started, Jae-hwan froze. His fighter drifted while Vryn ships fired on him. His squadron leader screamed orders over the comm, but Jae-hwan didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at nothing, while his shields failed and weapons fire tore into his ship. Another pilot from his squad had to break formation to physically push Jae-hwan's fighter out of the combat zone. By the time they got back to the carrier, Jae-hwan was catatonic. Dr. Kyung-soo examined him personally. The young pilot sat in the medical bay staring at his hands. Jae-hwan, the doctor said gently, can you tell me what happened? It took a long time, but finally Jae-hwan spoke. It was too quiet. I could hear everything. The weapons firing. The ships exploding. I knew there were living things inside those ships and I was killing them. I could hear myself breathing. I could hear my heart beating. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't make myself pull the trigger. It's okay, Dr. Kyung-soo said. You're safe now, am I? Jae-hwan looked up and his eyes were haunted. Because I don't feel safe. I feel like I'm drowning in silence. Part 1. The Noisy Warriors. The bridge of the Council warship Eternal Vigilance hummed with quiet efficiency. Officers from a dozen different species worked at their stations, their communications reduced to soft clicks, gentle whistles, and encrypted data streams. This was how civilized species conducted warfare, with dignity, precision, and above all silence. High Arbiter Velrosh stood at the center of the bridge, his crystalline body refracting the light from the tactical displays. His species had evolved on a world of silent hunters where a single sound could mean death. Every species in the Galactic Council understood this basic principle of warfare. Silence was survival. Every species except the humans. Human fleet approaching the engagement zone, announced the tactical officer, a being whose name translated roughly to careful observer of patterns. Velrosh watched the display as 12 human vessels moved into formation. They were crude ships by Council standards, built with excessive armor and weapons that seemed almost primitive. But in the 3 cycles since humanity had joined the war against the Vryn swarm, these crude ships had won battle after battle. "Open a channel to monitor human communications," Velrosh ordered. The communications officer hesitated. "High Arbiter, are you certain? The humans rarely encrypt their battle communications. It can be disturbing." "I need to understand how they fight," Velrosh replied. "Open the channel." The bridge filled with noise. It wasn't tactical data or encrypted commands. It was chaos. Human voices overlapped each other, shouting, laughing, and saying things that made no sense whatsoever. Beneath it all, there was a rhythmic pounding sound that the computer identified as music, a human concept that involved organized noise for entertainment purposes. Contact in 30 seconds. A human voice shouted, "Sungmin, you ready?" "Born ready," another voice responded. "Everyone got their playlist queued?" "What song we starting with, Captain?" "I'm thinking Don't Stop Me Now for the opening run. Then we switch to Thunderstruck when we hit their flagship." Velrosh's form flickered with confusion. What are they discussing? Are these code words? The communications officer checked his database. "No, High Arbiter. These are titles of ancient human audio recordings. They appear to be planning which music to play during the battle." "Music? During combat?" Before anyone could answer, the human fleet engaged the Vryn forces. The Vryn were a species of insectoid creatures that operated through hive communication. They were silent, efficient, and utterly ruthless. A Vryn fleet didn't waste time with sounds or signals. They simply swarmed and destroyed. But as the battle began, something unprecedented happened. The human ships charged forward while their communications channels broadcast that pounding rhythmic noise at maximum volume. Human voices shouted over the music, not in panic, but in what could only be described as excitement. "Here we go," someone yelled. "Taeyang, I got 3 on my tail." "I see them." Commander Taeyang's voice cut through the chaos. "Break left, I'll sweep around, and yeah, that's what I'm talking about." "Scratch 3 bugs." "Nice shot, Commander." "Did you see that explosion?" "That was beautiful." Velrosh watched in stunned silence as the human destroyer Indomitable, commanded by Captain Sungmin, flew directly into the thickest part of the Vryn formation. Its weapons blazed, destroying 2 Vryn fighters in seconds. A Vryn cruiser landed a direct hit on the Indomitable's hull, tearing through its armor. Velrosh expected a damage report or a retreat order. Instead, he heard laughter. "They got my paint." Sungmin's voice boomed through the channel. "Nobody scratches my paint. All weapons focus fire on that cruiser. Let's teach these bugs some manners." The music intensified. More human voices joined in, and Velrosh realized with horror that they were singing along with the noise. "This is madness," he whispered. But it was effective madness. The human ships moved with an unpredictability that the Vryn couldn't counter. Where Council tactics were based on careful formations and planned maneuvers, the humans seemed to make decisions on instinct. They took risks that no sane commander would attempt. They flew their ships like pilots who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Within 20 minutes, the Vryn fleet was in full retreat. The humans had won again, and they had done it while making enough noise to wake the dead. As the battle ended, Velrosh heard one final exchange over the human channel. "Anyone hurt?" Commander Taeyang asked. "Lieutenant Hyejin took a hit. Medical says she'll be fine." Good work, everyone. Same time next week?" There was laughter. Actual laughter. These creatures had just survived a deadly battle against one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they were laughing about it. Velrosh closed the channel and stood in the sudden silence of his bridge. His officers looked at him, waiting for orders. "Prepare a formal report," he said quietly. "I am recommending that human forces be required to follow proper combat protocols. This noise is unacceptable. It disrupts tactical coordination and shows a complete lack of military discipline." His second officer, a being named Dronkar, tilted his head. "But High Arbiter, the humans have the highest success rate of any species in the fleet. Perhaps their methods, however unusual, are effective." "Effectiveness is not the only measure of a soldier," Velrosh replied. "These humans fight like barbarians. They need to learn how civilized species conduct warfare." Over the next few days, Velrosh compiled his report. He included audio recordings of human battle communications, tactical analyses showing how their noise could theoretically be intercepted and used against them, and testimonials from other council officers who found the human approach disturbing. Ambassador G1, the human diplomat assigned to the council's military coordination office, was called to a meeting to discuss the issue. She sat across from Velrosh in a conference room designed for beings of various sizes and types. G1 was small by galactic standards, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold both amusement and weariness. "High Arbiter," she said, "I've read your report. I understand your concerns." "Then you agree that humans must adopt proper combat discipline?" G1 sighed. "It's not that simple. The noise, the music, the jokes, these aren't signs of a lack of discipline. They're how we cope with the stress of combat. Humans aren't like other species. We need these outlets." "What you need," Velrosh said firmly, "is to understand that you are part of a larger alliance. Your behavior affects other species. Some of our officers report difficulty concentrating during joint operations because of human noise." "I'll speak with Commander Taeyang," G1 promised. "But I'm asking you to reconsider this request. What you're asking might have consequences you don't understand. The only consequence will be a more professional human military." Velrosh replied, "The Council has made its decision. Beginning with the next major engagement, human forces will observe proper silence protocols. No music, no unnecessary vocalizations, only essential tactical communications." G1 stood slowly. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she simply nodded. "I'll inform our commanders. But High Arbiter, I hope you're right about this." 3 days later, Commander Taeyang received his orders. He sat in his quarters aboard the flagship, reading the directive over and over. His second officer, Lieutenant Hye-jin, stood nearby. "Sir, what are your orders?" Taeyang closed his eyes. "We're going silent. Next battle, no music, no chatter. Just tactical communications only." Hye-jin's face went pale. "Sir, Are they serious?" "Dead serious. Council's orders." He looked up at her. "Pass the word to all ships. We follow Council protocols from now on." As Hye-jin left to spread the word, Taeyang stared at the wall of his quarters. On it hung a photograph from his academy days, showing him and his squad mates laughing after a training exercise. He had a bad feeling about this.